I didn't like any of that.
Cool.
Hello everyone, happy holidays. If you've been here since last December, you'll remember that we ended 2023 by paying tribute to Super Eye Patch Wolf's Favorite Thing series. And you'd better believe that we're doing it again in 2024. In fact, if I'm being honest, I want this to become a yearly series for us. As I said in the 2023 video, I think it's very important to stop every now and again and just remind ourselves of the things that have brought us joy over a certain period of time. And in my case, I find that doing so on a yearly basis is a good, healthy pace to keep up without clogging up my upload schedule. As such, it is time to once again bow down at the altar of multimedia and remember what TV shows, games, and more have helped me pull myself out of the languid swamps of morbidity and hobble across the finish line of yet another rotation around the sun. Now, unlike last year where we did things in the form of a top 10 list, this time we're going to go a little bit more loose and free form with it and keep things sorted into categories. Just know that if I'm talking about it in this video at all, then it is just as valid as anything else on this list, and everything should be treated as an equal recommendation. So without further ado, let's begin by talking about everyone's favorite form of passive content consumption,
the boob tube. We're tiny, we're toony, we're all a little.
At this point, attempting to adapt a video game into a non-interactive medium tends to be met with about as much derision from the armchair media critics that make up the internet as your average live-action anime adaptation. However, just as the world learned last year with the surprisingly good One Piece adaptation on Netflix, you should always leave yourself open to being surprised. And while we're talking about live-action adaptations, that's probably as good a segue as we're going to get for a show that I think just about everybody was expecting to trip and faceplant right out the gate.
It's pretty fair to say that most people were probably expecting Amazon's Fallout adaptation to be, well, bad. As with just about any adaptation of a beloved property into an unexpected medium, the doom posting began almost immediately in comment sections the internet over. And that's why it has to have been so gratifying for so many people when the show finally dropped and pretty much managed to shut up every single one of the naysayers. Showing us a gorgeously realized take on America post-nuclear devastation and featuring a band of eccentric weirdos that carefully but masterfully balance the razor-thin wire between quirky and annoying, the Fallout TV show managed to craft a world that held me at rapt attention the entire way through. Which is to say nothing of Walton Goggins' spellbinding performance as an irradiated ghoul cowboy both literally and figuratively falling apart at the seams. Now, I personally am not the biggest fan of Fallout. I've played a couple of the Bethesda-era games, but I am hardly what you would call a super fan, so take my word for what it is. But as what would probably be considered the platonic ideal of a casual Fallout fan, I have absolutely no complaints and recommend it to fans of Fallout and people who have never even played the games.
And if adapting Fallout into a successful live-action television show sounds like a Herculean task, then it still manages to pale in comparison to our next subject, which had the even more unenviable position of trying to make League of Legends palatable to a general audience. However, just as they showed us back in 2021, if there was anybody who was up to this task, it was the Studio Fortiche. Needless to say, the biggest surprise upon Arcane's initial release was how they managed to turn a show based on the internet's favorite punching bag into something that just about everybody on the internet was clamoring for more of.
Combining, frankly, stupidly jaw-dropping levels of animation with actually good character writing and interesting world building, Arcane shocked the world by making people everywhere ask, how the hell was this good? And with the release of Season 2 this year, Arcane managed to mostly finish the story it started 3 years ago with a story that only now and again makes a couple of hiccups along the way. However, whatever criticisms I have of the show are quickly suffocated on Zaun's toxic gases when compared to the way we get a mostly satisfying conclusion to the stories of Kate, Vi, Powder, Echo, and the rest of the ragtag gang of cops, terrorists, and lesbians that we've all gotten so close to over the course of this incredible show. It also features a frankly shockingly tasteful sex scene that, while arguably poorly timed within the greater narrative, is such a satisfying payoff to 3 years of build-up that it's still going on the list of the all-time greats.
But moving on from things that people might have expected to be bad, I want to take some time to talk about a show that I was praying to God would be good. I make no exaggeration when I say that Kamen Rider Gotchard was not only one of the worst seasons of Kamen Rider that I have ever watched, but it genuinely might have been one of the worst television shows that I had ever seen. So when the leaks began to trickle out about the follow-up show, Kamen Rider Gav, I think a lot of us were probably pretty skeptical. The Gav suit was not something that really looked good on a static image, I would say. It's kind of the polar opposite of the problem Gotchard had, which Gotchard, I will say, had a lovely looking suit. But Gav, it doesn't make a great first impression. Combine that with the news that the apparent gimmick for the season was going to be snack foods, and the base rider form for Gav himself being based on jelly beans, it was weird. But I should have remembered how strange it first seemed when Kamen Rider Gaim was revealed to be a show about breakdancers with a fruit theme. And we all know how that ended, didn't we, Kamen Rider fans? Yes, like some sort of miraculous candy-coated gift from God, Kamen Rider Gav descended from the heavens and has reminded me week to week since its release why I fell in love with the medium of tokusatsu in the first place. Featuring as its main character a complete and total good boy who manages to be a human ray of sunshine without dipping into the depths of annoying one-dimensional character writing, Kamen Rider Gav is the story of a candy-coated superhero who uses his powers to fight against drug addicts and hot goth people. I will not be elaborating on that. If you have ever wanted to check out Kamen Rider but just never gotten around to it, I cannot recommend Gav enough as a starting point. We have barely gotten started and it has just been an absolute joy week to week.
And you are?
I'm the guy.
Moving on to the subject of video games, though, we're going to start by discussing a game that I have had no less than 2 nightmares about already, one of which I managed to have before I even played the damn thing.
Mouthwashing is a very special kind of video game that reminds me of why I love games as a medium for storytelling. Telling the tale of the struggling employees of a delivery company that gets stranded in deep space on a broken ship with no hope of rescue and only enough supplies to last a few months, Mouthwashing is an existentially horrific nightmare that I could not turn away from the word go. Taking its name from the crew's harrowing discovery that the cargo which had now cost them their lives was nothing more than an entire warehouse's worth of bottles of mouthwash. Mouthwashing takes the player through a harrowing, non-linear story of desperation, human drama, greed, and misery that managed to rattle me to my core and has stuck with me long after playing. Rendered in this gorgeous stylized 3D that calls to mind some of my favorite games on the Dreamcast like Illbleed, and brought to life by a cast of characters that feel just so uncomfortably human, Mouthwashing is a game that I cannot stop singing the praises of, and yet I want to say almost nothing about in this video because you need to experience it for yourself. If you haven't played Mouthwashing yet, it costs less than $15 on Steam and can be completed in less than 4 hours. Do yourself a favor and take responsibility.
Sucker for Love: A Date to Die For is a game that I have already made a video on, and though I told myself I wasn't going to be covering anything on this list that has already gotten a video on my channel, this is my game of the year, and if you disagree, feel free to go fuck yourself. Now, this next section may be cheating because technically this game entered early access back in 2023, but it just went 1.0 last month, and fuck you, it's my channel. Have you ever wanted to be the captain of your own spaceship? I don't really after playing Mouthwashing, but if you've ever wanted to be the haggard engineer yelling at the captain that you're not a miracle worker, then maybe Void Crew is the game for you.
Come on, you son of a bitch.
Something else incoming now, Captain.
Your ship's power system is under strain, and one of the circuit breakers is now functioning.
Damn it, Delilah, keep your shit together for 5 minutes.
Void Crew is a multiplayer game in which you and a group of friends take on the role of crewing a spaceship as you fight enemies, plunder relics, and in my case, run around the ship turning dials. The main selling point of Void Crew is that each player can take on the role of captain, gunner, engineer, scavenger, and more, switching between each of them as necessary. Every player has their role to play in the operation of the ship, and as the game goes on, things only tend to get more and more hectic. I personally really enjoy playing the engineer because everyone else gets to worry about piloting or aiming, and I just have to run around fixing shit that breaks and keeping the boosters charged. Until we take the energy boat, which gets stronger from having power overdrawn, and then suddenly I'm babysitting the circuit breakers like I'm playing a life or death version of Whack-A-Mole.
Now for my favorite part of the show. What'd that say? Talk?
About comics.
Oh, God, this is always death. All right.
Comic books. They're like manga, except they're in color and nobody actually reads them. But they are a subject that I'm passionate about, so I feel it's only fair that we give them their due course during our yearly roundup. I made a video last year talking about how Robert Kirkman's Energon universe was one of the most exciting things to happen in the world of comics in recent memory, and now a year later it's had time to fully form and develop into something that is as special as I was hoping it was going to be. Transformers has actually finished its first major story arc this year with issue 12, which culminates in one of the most amazing things I have ever seen printed on a page. In the aftermath of Robot Dr. Mangala creating a machine that chops up whales in order to power some sort of gravity pump which pulls a dying robot planet across the far reaches of space in order to consume the Earth, we see Optimus Prime literally being surfed back to Earth down a tide that is literally being pulled from space back down to the Earth's surface. If this kind of imagery does not get you to check out comic books, I genuinely don't know what will. And the other half of this collab has been no slouch either, starting with the miniseries as telling the backstories of Cobra Commander, Destro, Duke, and Scarlet, and leading to the release of issue 1 of just G.I. Joe recently. These stories have been full of action, military intrigue, and genuine heart that has managed to weave these two connected universes together. I'm holding this backwards. These two connected universes together in a way that has to be seen to be believed. It is incredible how they took two very interesting stories with a lot of potential and managed to create a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. Even if you've never really cared all that much about G.I. Joe or Transformers, and believe me, I was kind of in the same position before I picked up the first issue of Void Rivals on a whim, I think this can make you a believer. These comics are not good G.I. Joe comics or good Transformers comics, they're just good stories in general. But if you're one of those annoying sad sacks on the internet who sees that something's associated with a brand and hates it on concept, then let me recommend something that's a little more original. Uncanny Valley. Uncanny Valley is the story of a kid named Oliver who he's half cartoon. If you've ever watched Cool World and wondered what would happen in the aftermath of a steamy tryst between a Noid and a Doodle, Uncanny Valley might interest you. Starting from a surprisingly grounded place, our protagonist Oliver begins the story not knowing of his status as a half-toon, but we see him surviving events that would possibly maim or even kill other children and come out completely unscathed for reasons he doesn't quite understand, like jumping off of a bridge and leaving an Oliver-shaped hole in the ground. The story kicks off in earnest when Oliver's existence is discovered by the denizens of Toon World, who seem to be after him for some inexplicable reason. If you're familiar with the Percy Jackson novels or the Disney Plus series, then this is a setup that's going to seem a little bit familiar to you. This kicks off an odyssey in which Oliver and his grandfather Pecos Pete have to go on the run in order to protect Oliver from an unknown fate at the hands of Mexican flea market versions of classic cartoon characters. Smart, funny, and just a genuinely good time, Uncanny Valley is one of the best original stories I've read this year, and just one of the best comics I've read in general. Pick it up for yourself. I guarantee you'll have a good time with it. And now, before we move into the final section of the video, I want to take some time to talk about some things that fell just shy of favorite territory, but are still worth mentioning.
Oh, I feel it. I feel the adrenaline in it, baby!
It feels just a little bit odd to nominate a mobile game as one of my favorites of the year, but Wizardry Variants Daphne has been such a unique and enjoyable time killer as a gacha game in the form of an old-school dungeon crawler that I would be remiss not to talk about it somewhere. By that same token, Pokemon TCG Pocket has been a great way for me to scratch my trading card collecting itch without spending even more money, and that's always a good thing. On the subject of trading card games, I would have loved to talk about how cool it is that the new Ultraman card game was released in English, but I haven't been able to actually find it in any LGS near me, so I can't really speak on it one way or the other. Moving on from mobile games and card games for a moment, there is at least one more video game that I have been meaning to talk about on this channel at some point, but I held off from doing a full video on, so I'll at least briefly mention it here. I love the video game Goddess of Victory Nike not only for the cheesecake, obviously, but for having ridiculously good writing for a game that nobody would have expected it from. And because of that, I was chomping at the bit to get my hands on Stellar Blade, which was made by the same studio. And while I did enjoy Stellar Blade as an action Souls-like we have Nier Automata at home, ultimately, the just okay story ended up letting me down precisely because I know from experience that Shift Up is capable of so much more. Here's hoping their next console game will deliver the goods because I was rooting hard for y'all. This will likely be the last time that I ever end up mentioning Stellar Blade on this channel because, as I said in my last video, I have no interest in either getting the chuds riled up or making them think that I'm one of them. I'm just a silly leftist on the internet who likes butt games. And now, moving on from one controversial topic to yet another, this is the only, what I would consider, dishonorable mention on this list. A movie that I really loved, but cannot in good conscience recommend to any of you because of an extremely controversial choice that they made. Because although Late Night with the Devil is without a doubt one of the most unique and well-acted movies I have seen this year, the decision to include elements of AI-generated imagery for their interstitial screens is both extremely distracting as well as deeply disappointing. When any studio chooses to include AI-generated imagery as part of their commercially released work, it comes at the expense of real artists who could have been working on that project. Something we saw firsthand from the number of artists online who posted their own, much better takes on what this shitty AI skeleton could have been, and expressed that they would have killed to be able to work on a film like this. So, while I did love everything else about Late Night with the Devil, I did not pay to watch it, and I cannot recommend that any of my viewers do the same.
And with that unpleasantness out of the way, there is one more thing I want to discuss while we're still here. As I mentioned in my one-year retrospective video, lately I have grown a greater appreciation for the work of smaller YouTubers who are putting out incredible videos who, at the same time, are not getting the attention from the algorithm that they truly deserve. And while I admit that amongst YouTubers I don't exactly have a lot of clout to be passing out, I wanted to take some time to highlight some of my favorites that I've discovered within the past year who really, if I can even just send one of you their way, it would feel to me like I'm helping to give back at least a little of what they're getting to the internet.
First is a channel that is the purest definition of the term criminally underrated: Waking World. Waking World has such a unique yet simple presentation style that's the kind of thing you would kick yourself for not being the one to think of first. Combining this charming presentation with brilliant framing and thoughtful commentary, Waking World is a channel that deserves way more subscribers than the 1.65k he's sitting on at time of writing. That's less than I have, and that guy is definitely putting way more work into his videos than I am. My recommendation is for you to check out his video, Going to Concerts is Weird. This visual journey in which Waking World weaves a captivating narrative while telling the viewer about why the experience of going to concerts is so important to them. The next creator that I want to spotlight is Meckles Frog, or Meckles the Frog based on their banner, I'm not sure which. Either way, like I suspect many of their subscribers did, I found Meckles when I was recommended the video they made on the importance of inconvenience, a subject that really hit for me in a way that I didn't expect it to, but maybe I should have considering my iPod video that I made a couple of weeks ago. Meckles has made a number of video essays on a number of subjects, and all of them are just really interesting to hear their perspective on. Given that the aforementioned video is easily their most popular one, I am going to recommend a completely different video of theirs: The Community That the Internet Forgot. This video is my absolute favorite genre, an oral history of an ultimately inconsequential subsection of the internet that nevertheless had its own community with lore and in-jokes. As somebody who spent a lot of time in high school on the weird quasi-social network attached to the official website for the musician Curly, this kind of thing is fascinating to me, and it was a wonderful journey listening to Meckles tell their tale. And finally, although this last creator is easily much more successful than myself in terms of subscriber numbers, I still want to give a shout out to Yuri Kitsune. The video he made earlier this year called You Ever Feel Like All This Is Pointless hit me in a very specific place as a small YouTuber doing their best to make it and feeling like I'm constantly just fighting against the current. Yuri makes some incredible videos, and it frankly broke my heart to listen to them dealing with the same feelings that I have over the past year. I don't have much clout to throw around here, but for what it's worth, if you're watching this and haven't seen any of Yuri's videos, please do. His video on Screamers is possibly my absolute favorite video on the subject.
And I think that's going to do it for this year's wrap-up. There are plenty more things from 2024 that I did love, but I don't want this video to go on forever. However, for those of you who are just hungry for a little bit more, how about we do a quick rapid-fire session?
I love a lot of the ideas I hear behind some extreme horror novels, but frankly, a lot of those concepts end up being better than the actual books themselves. So a huge thank you to both Jules Dapper and Morpho for giving us normal schlubs a way to experience these stories without having to suffer through the awful writing. Here's looking at you, Aaron Beauregard, and your quote, braised babes. Moving from books to cinema, Deadpool 3, Godzilla x Kong The New Empire, and Transformers 1 will all ensure that I am never beating the normie allegations in much the same way that Dungeon Meshi, Dan to Dan, and Season 2 of Oshi no Ko will ensure that I am never beating the weeb allegations. And speaking of not beating the weeb allegations, let's round up our rapid fire section by giving a quick shout out to a manga that technically did not come out this year, but did release officially in English this year, Destroy All Humans, They Cannot Be Regenerated. If you know me, I've mentioned before on this channel that I love card games, but tend to not really like Magic the Gathering at all. So somehow the fact that they made this amazing romance story based around Magic the Gathering, and somehow it is one of the best manga I have ever read, like, I cannot recommend this enough. I absolutely love this manga, and fuck you, it technically came out this year. Okay, so I know I said that the last recommendation was going to be the one that finishes off this list, but I do have a literal last-minute recommendation, as in I am recording this the day before the video is supposed to go live, because I just recently picked up and finished what is colloquially known as the Green Yuri. You've probably seen this cover floating around on the internet if you run in anime circles, and I have to give this an enthusiastic recommendation. Beautifully drawn, really cute, only one volume out right now, and it is a very slow burn. Like by the end of the first volume, I would say we haven't really hit like a proper romance arc yet, but what we do have is very adorable, and I look forward to seeing a lot more. So pick this up if you like manga or just cute girls or the color green.
And so with all that out of the way, I just want to say thank you to all of my subscribers for sticking around through 2024, and I look forward to spending 2025 with you. If you found this video by random happenstance, then hey, thank you for watching this far. I highly recommend checking out some of my other videos, like my video from last year I made about the best things from 2023. It's a little bit in my older style, where I don't talk on camera and really didn't know how to avoid the copyright filter yet, but I still stand by most of the recommendations from it. And as always, just remember that this has been a powerfully pointless video, but I hope you enjoyed it anyways.